So testimony is done for the week in the El Chapo trial. On Thursday, the former secretary to Joaquin El Chapo Guzman told the court about how the drug operation spread to different countries. Alex Cifuentes, who you can see right in the middle there, in the middle of that photo, negotiated deals for El Chapo. He moved El Chapo's cocaine from Colombia and Ecuador to the U.S. and Canada.
He was first introduced to the kingpin by his brother, George Cifuentes. Jorge testified earlier about his family's infamous Colombia drug cartel and how he supplied El Chapo with cocaine early on. Meanwhile, El Chapo's legal team struggled in the cross-examination of IT guru Christian Rodriguez. Rodriguez admitted he suffered 2 mental breakdowns while trying to escape from El Chapo, but the defense had little follow-up to the incriminating text messages Rodriguez helped the FBI to capture.
So joining us now is criminal defense lawyer and former prosecutor Vinoo Varghese. Vinoo, thanks for joining us. So no testimony today, right? Today they're off, but yesterday was sort of the last day of the week for testimony. Give us a sort of wrap-up of what we heard this week.
Well, I think you heard damning tapes, the testimony by Anderson, the introduction of these tapes. All of this was rough stuff because now you're hearing for the first time. You had one tape with El Chapo before, but for the first time you're hearing El Chapo's voice talking to his wife and talking about
his mistress,
you know, talking about life in the cartel. And we heard yesterday about how he had wanted to get an AK-47 to his daughter.
Yes.
There was also testimony by an individual named Edgar Galvan, who is a lower-level individual. But one of the interesting things about his testimony, and apparently there's no testimony he ever actually met El Chapo, actually ever spoke to him. He was his bosses. There were like at least 2 or 3 levels between him and El Chapo. And this is interesting from just a legal perspective to lay people to understand that, because you probably heard the term hearsay, right? Hearsay is not allowed. But under the federal rules of evidence, there's an exception for co-conspirator testimony. So if somebody else who's alleged to have been connected to somebody else tells you stuff about that other person, then you get to testify about those conversations. So this guy named Jaguar was a very violent individual, and he talked about the drug trade in El Paso and Juarez, Mexico. You know, the thing about nicknames, we talked a little bit about El Chapo's nicknames yesterday. One of the things, a little confession to make, I did represent someone who was, you know, involved with the Sinaloa cartel. He also had a nickname in the conspiracy when he was arrested. His nickname was the Jew. So he was the one. He was the Jewish guy that was involved in within multiple deals. Sinaloa cartel loves nicknames.
Yeah.
So the other thing that should be of interest when you talk about Cifuentes was basically his, as you mentioned, his secretary. There's a lot of, you know, details now. So you're hearing people who are not directly connected to El Chapo with people with more details about El Chapo. But one of the things that should go to know, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, is that now the U.S. Marshals, who are transporting El Chapo from Manhattan to Brooklyn every day, and it's a good thing they're getting a day off, are not being paid.
Oh, yes, of course. Same risk, no pay.
Correct. Yeah. So, you know, this is the interesting thing, and that they're being responsible. And there was a comment by a senior U.S. Marshal who said that only deputies who are considered essential are getting paid, but these guys are the ones bringing El Chapo in. Yeah. So, you know, all this talk about, you know, the shutdown and the wall, and ultimately what Donald Trump, you know, is doing is keeping El Chapo in, but who knows for how long. He may be able to escape to Canada. So.
Oh, Lord. Well, God knows he's escaped twice already.
Right. So you mentioned Cifuentes. His brother is also testifying. How will we see differences in those 2 testimonies? I
think it's just a level of detail, both of them. Jorge, who testified earlier, talked about being involved in a bunch of different things and trying to lead a legitimate lifestyle, but he couldn't. And so he had been to Colombia, and then he didn't work out. He tried to work in legitimate businesses, and it just didn't work out. So he went back to the cartel. So, you know, there's really not much testimony. It's more stuff. And again, you know, I said this last month when we were here, that it's just sort of pylons, you know, like it's just piling on and piling on and piling on. We have several weeks left.
So what about the defense this week? We mentioned a little bit about the IT guy talking about the, you know, couple of breakdowns that he had. How has the defense performed this week?
I'm not sure. I'm not certain if they should have gone down and tried to attack him so much, right? I think you sort of, when you look at this testimony, you kind of take a step back and you don't hit hard. And at the end of it, you go, so what? right? And I think that would have been a better strategy than trying to get him to convince him or try to argue with him that this breakdown was really more related to his family problems, which he ultimately said. He did say that, yes, I did have a lot of family issues that contributed to the breakdown, but how much of a win is that for the defense, right?
Really.
So ultimately, yeah, he was El Chapo's guy. He was nervous, and he cooperated. I think the better tact would be to say, you got all these guys, ultimately, let's go back to our initial theme. There's so much corruption in the Mexican government. There's corruption in the U.S. government. El Chapo's a fall guy. I think that's the only thing that could work here.
All right.
Really interesting.
Look forward to next week.
That's right. Vinoo Varghese, always good to have you, man. Happy weekend.
Thank you.